So I'll just start by telling you a little bit about my journey, because I think it's probably worth framing this presentation in that way at this point, to give you an idea of where I've been and how I've gotten to the stage that I'm at now, giving a presentation on how to niche. So the best part 20 years actually as a website developer, if you count the hobby years, working in different agencies, small and large, different contract roles for big companies, as well as being self-employed a number of years as a web developer. One of the main challenges that I have found as my time as particularly self-employed, but this is across the board for agencies large and small, is gaining new clients, finding people who you sort of connect with and who you want to work with. It's something that we all face as a challenge. I'm sure you recognize that. And a kind of a pattern that I've noticed over the years, and that's within myself, but also the way that we tend to sort of behave as freelancers, is a lack of clarity in the work that we do and why we do it. And that really points to the kind of the root cause of the problem. For a long time, I had really no sense of purpose in what I was doing. I'd go to work, but you wasn't really quite sure what it was, what was the vision, what was I trying to achieve in my day-to-day. I realized I had no clear audience. Who was I talking to when I went out there to networking events, when I put together email campaigns, web pages? Who was I talking to? I was a web developer talking to anyone who needed a website. That's pretty much everyone these days. And therefore, I had no purpose and no audience. And so I didn't have a way to stand out. I would tell people I'm a web designer, web developer. And I'm sure lots of other people here, copywriters, etc., illustrators, brand designers, they experience a similar thing. It's difficult to stand out when you fall back to your job title as your kind of main way of presenting yourself. So what I decided to do was niche down. And I chose to work with small charities. That's charities that have an income of less than £1 million a year, which makes up the bulk of the third sector in the UK. I really wanted to support those small organisations. And it sounds a bit dramatic to say, but it did prove to be the most important decision that I've made in my career to date. And I'm hoping that throughout the course of this presentation, and certainly by the end of it, you will understand why it's so important to at least look at niching. It's certainly changed things around for me. So in this session, we're going to look at life as it is right now. So that's people that may be new to freelancing, been freelancing for a while, maybe run a small agency, but are facing problems that can typically and hopefully be solved by looking at this niching opportunity. I'm going to cover some reasons to choose a niche. Now, I'm going to only touch on that quite lightly because I think, if you signed up for this presentation, you're probably on the cusp of being sold on the idea. So we'll skip over that quickly, but I think it's worth touching on them. I'm going to define a niche, and I'm going to define it in the way that it makes sense to me, because there are different ways of looking at niching. So I'm going to define it in the way that it makes sense to me and how I have used this definition in my own business. Ultimately, I'm going to show you how to niche down. So this is really what this session is all about. It's taking you from that life as it is now to being able to confidently choose your own niche audience. And I'm expecting this presentation to run 45, 60 minutes, depending on how many questions we get. Feel free to drop questions into the chat window. I haven't got it open in front of me at the moment because it's just taken up too much space, but I'll check that at the end of the session. And if you want to wait until then, we can put the audio on and have a chat as well. Okay. Right, so life as it is now. Do any of these things resonate? Do any of these things sound familiar with you? So as a freelancer, small business owner, you may struggle to tell people what it is that you do. For me personally, I used to tell people I was a web designer, but it always felt like there's more to me than that. It's just a thing that I do. But I had no framework for articulating what that meant, what more meant. So I ultimately struggled, and I just fell back to my job title of, I'll make websites for people. You often find yourself bored or frustrated by client work. This is something that I've certainly experienced in the past when I'm not really connected with that client. But, you know, it can feel like you're doing drudge work. It can feel like you're not connecting with them, and it can get quite frustrating if you're not working with the right people. You often feel like your work lacks purpose. So that's something that I touched on earlier on. So we've all got bills to pay. Maybe we're in business because we want to make a bit of money, but ultimately we know that there's more to it than that, but we're not sure what. So we go through the motions on a daily basis, but we are unaware of the bigger picture. We kind of get the sense that there's one there, but we don't know really what that is or what it looks like. Writing proposals is exhausting. If you're in the web development business, then you certainly have experienced this. It's the same in many other industries as well. When you work with lots of different types of clients, each one's got its own needs. So you create a proposal for that person or that business. Particularly in the creative space, you have to go into quite a lot of detail. Then that detail will be questioned. You have to have conversations, lots of email back and forth. And then after a couple of weeks, you may not even get that work. So what you end up doing is just feeling burnt out of putting loads of proposals out there, not winning enough of them. And it's just an exhausting place to be. You don't get enough clients, or you keep landing low quality clients, those highly demanding clients that are incredibly demanding, but also don't want to spend any money. They're very easy to get. We all come across them, and through experience, you learn to identify them. But yeah, we still sometimes take them on because, well, going back to that earlier point, we have bills to pay. We've got stuff that we need to do. So, I mean, does this sound familiar? Does this sort of resonate with any of you? A few nods. I can only see a few of you. So I'm gonna, yeah. Okay. So, interestingly though, according to this research, the number one reason that people choose to freelance is for freedom and flexibility. And a lot of stuff that I just went through there, those pain points, they don't sound particularly freeing, do they? It doesn't sound like a very flexible way of living. There is a better way, and that is to choose a niche audience. So, I mean, what is a niche? Lots of people have heard of this. They're kind of scared by it because they kind of know what it involves, but they don't want to go down that path. For me, a niche is simply a community of people who share similar values. That, to me, that's all it is. That's all it means. And I've chosen the word values there very carefully, and it's something that I'm going to talk about a lot in this presentation. But before that, let's have a look at some of those reasons to niche. One of the things that I found was that marketing became incredibly simpler as a result of choosing a niche. So, freelancers really struggle with marketing themselves. I imagine that if you're talking to a room, of 100 people, and in that room you have people in different job roles, CEOs, taxi drivers, plumbers, whoever it might be, lots of different disciplines. It's very difficult to create a message that actually resonates with all of those different people. But when you narrow things down and you choose that niche, you almost talk to one person or a very small group of people that share those similar values. And that ultimately just naturally means that your marketing, messaging, and activities become easier. So for me, that's kind of the top reason to niche down. Projects become more predictable. Again, you've narrowed down the people that you work with. There's going to be a lot of commonality between those projects and those individuals. And therefore, it's less surprising, the work that you do. There's less scope there, which makes things more predictable. You can take on more clients. As I said a moment ago about those proposals being exhausting, you're going to hit a limit when you're doing everything from scratch every time. If you narrow things down and make things simple, you can put processes in place that enable you to take on a greater number of clients. And in terms of growth as well, you can take people on to fulfill those processes that you've defined as part of onboarding those niche clients. More word of mouth referrals. This is an amazing thing. Working in the third sector with charities, they network amongst themselves. They talk and they refer people who's done a good job for them to their colleagues and their partners. For me personally, I believe that specializing, that niching down is a really good way of future-proofing your business. A lot of people swear by being generalists, but the way that I kind of see things going is that we've got more and more DIY tools out there now where you can build your websites yourself. You can get logos really cheaply. Artificial intelligence is starting to write content for people, or it's not doing it very well at the moment, but 5-10 years time, who knows where that's going to go. When you niche down, you become a specialist, and with specialism, you build trust. And that is really, that human component of trust is how you future-proof your business. So on that, niching typically happens when you get tired of being a generalist, or when you realize that generalizing your work is not the most productive way or the happiest way of working. So the question is, are you ready to specialize? I hope so. Give me a thumbs up. Bob's not sure. Well, maybe by the end of this, you will be. So let's have a look at a couple of examples here. Now, I actually interviewed Rebecca and Tina for a book that I wrote on niching down. And I found these two stories really, really interesting. Rebecca works with social media managers to increase their pricing. And she believes that people should be fairly compensated for their services. So she goes out there and she finds people that believes in the same thing that she believes. She just happens to work with social media managers to increase their pricing. Tina creates content for sustainable fashion brands. She wants to redefine the standards of the fashion industry. So she's gone out there and she's found other people in that industry that believe the same thing as her. She's a copywriter, but she's really narrowed down who she's going to work with based upon her values of wanting to redefine the standards of the fashion industry. So that's two very good case studies there, and I encourage you to, these are in the ebook that's available on my website. So if you want to find out more, I did do an interview with these two, find out more a bit about their story in that ebook. So this is what I've kind of come to from this. Your niche community, and I'm calling it a community rather than a market, because a community is something that you serve. You serve a community, you serve the people in that community. It's that community exists at the intersection of your values. That is the things that you deeply care about, the things that make you you, and your skills, the things that you can do in the world, the way that you add value to other people. And I believe that that intersection is where your niche community can be found. Does that make sense? So I just want to tackle this one head on, because this is, frankly, this is what I kind of started with a few years ago when I was looking to niche. Market-led niching. If you look at if you Google how to find a niche, you'll come across like some of the top ranking Google articles will tell you to go onto Google, do some keyword research, try and find unserved or underserved markets. So you might end up saying, I end up being a copywriter and I want to apply my skills to the healthcare sector. I'm a web designer to the education sector. And sector-based market-led niching is fine. That's ultimately where you might end up being. But I strongly believe that the best way to get to that point is to look inward first and look at your own value system that will then lead you to the right markets, rather than looking for opportunities and then trying to apply yourself to them. Because if you go that route, you can basically get bored if it's not something that's really meaningful to you. So that leads us on to value-led niching. And that starts with your story. So your experiences, the events, the things that have shaped you, the thing in your own personal history. Start by looking at that, asking a few good questions. And when you ask those questions, that can kind of begin to throw some light on the things that you care about, your values. And when you have a good understanding of your own values, when you've articulated them, that is when you can begin to find other people who also believe the same stuff as you. That's when you can start to find your niche community. And as I said, it could be a market sector. It might not be, because people that believe the same things as you might be spread out in different places across different market sectors. That's why I think it's more helpful to think of niching as a niche community rather than a niche market or a niche sector or whatever that is. Is that all making sense? Awesome. So what does your story say about your values? Now, we all have values. The challenging thing is that a lot of us aren't attuned to them on a daily basis. But actually, our values shape our behavior. They kind of decide what we do on a subconscious level. So what does your own story say about your values? And I've put, it's about to get heavy because I'm going to ask some pretty introspective questions here. I don't expect you to answer them right now, but I'm going to give you an example of what you could ask to begin this conversation to finding your values. So what's in your story? So think about a time when you felt empowered and respected. That could be in work, but it could be personal life as well. And when you think about those times, that gives you an idea of the things that energize and motivate you. Conversely, you may have felt bored or disrespected at times. And this can give you an indication of the kind of things that you've done, the people that you've worked with or met in your life who are not healthy and the kind of things that you might want to avoid. And which people have had the biggest impact on you? What lessons have you learned, from, a positive or a negative impact on you? And how has it changed you as a person? What are your proudest achievements? So when we look at our accomplishments, things that we can look at and say, do you know what? That was something that I'm proud of. That indicates something deeper than the work itself. That indicates a sense of purpose. So zero in on that. What frustrates or disappoints you? Now, this is a bit more of a philosophical question. So what is it about the world, about people, about systems that frustrates you or just, kind of makes you feel a bit helpless? Those are the kind of things that can point to the more philosophical beliefs that you have, which again can throw light on your values, which can take you towards the right people. Which projects would you have worked on for free? So, once you get the money problem out of your head, once you stop being hamstrung by, oh, I need to pay the bills, you can think bigger than those projects that are right in front of the end of your nose. We all do it. So feel free to screen grab this slide if you'd like to take a sample of these questions and kind of work through them in your own time. I'll leave it on there for a few seconds to do that. Okay. So the point of this exercise of asking those questions is it will begin to reveal the systems of values, the system of values that you possess within you. As I said, we all have values. We just don't necessarily know that they're there, what they are. So what you would do with these questions is begin to spider diagram them onto a piece of paper. Now, this is really great to do on your own or with someone else and kind of bounce the responses around a little bit. So we'll take that first question of when have you felt empowered and respected? You might start writing down things like, I remember a time when I taught my team how to use a new piece of software. And at that point, I stood up in front of them, I showed them how to use it. And actually they respected me in that moment. And that's made a mark on my own experience. That was an interesting time. When I challenged a colleague on a decision that they'd made. I don't usually do that, but on this occasion, I challenged them and I felt empowered as a result of it. When your boss told you that you've done a good job, they really meant it. And I felt respected in that moment. When I told my client that they had to find more budget, that was very empowering. I could have done the work for £1,000, but I actually told them they needed 3. And, that was quite a moment for me. It was scary, but I went through it. And in the end, I felt more empowered and they respected me for it. When I quit my job, a few things more empowering than quitting your job. When I said no to a project that didn't feel right, that's quite an interesting one for me. I personally have done that. And I went through this process and I was like, I said no to projects in the past because they don't feel right. But then it's kind of ended there. And I've not really examined what my thought process is in that moment. But looking back at my own story, I've been able to analyze this. So I'm going to give you like an example of how this might pan out. So here we have a story from my history. I said no to a project one time because it didn't feel right. Now, the purpose of this part of the exercise is to then connect those elements of your history to your own values. So I said no to a project that didn't feel right. The obvious question to ask is, what is it about the project that didn't feel right? What was it that I didn't like about it? Well, it looked like the company didn't treat their staff very well. I've heard things about this company. I've seen stuff that's made me feel a bit uneasy. Basically, I didn't want to work with them because the project, it just didn't feel right. And this is the reason why. The company don't seem to treat their staff well. Okay, well, what does that say about me? What does that say about the things that I believe, the things that I value? Or if we were to articulate this, you might say that I care about the well-being of other people and I want to work with others who feel the same. I don't want to work with people who treat their staff badly. And all of a sudden, we have a potential value that has emerged of protecting and nurturing other people. I can't see many faces, but is this making sense? Some tentative nods and some thumbs up, thank you. So that is a potential value, and you will have this sort of spider diagram flow from all of these questions that you ask yourself, and then the answers that you give. When you dig deep and you try and figure out why, that's when you'll start to find sort of overlapping themes, if you like, and commonality between some of the values that you have. And that's a really useful and important exercise to go through. So once you've done this and you've gone through that process, you may find a number of values, a number of things that are important to you. So we're saying that values are unique and individual to you and your experiences. So this isn't an exhaustive list of values. The one that I just gave you there, the example was protecting and nurturing others. But you may also look back over your own history and say, striving for simplicity is something that I've done time and again. When I think about it, that process there, I wanted to make that as simple as possible. That code that I wrote, I'm always writing code that's really simple, not convoluted. Conversations that I have with people, I always want to get to the point and make it simple. That is a value of mine that I've identified by looking at my past experiences. Maybe you rebel against the status quo. Maybe you see things that shouldn't be, or things that could be improved in your companies that you've worked for and people that you've worked with. And that's the way that things have always been done. And you've said, no, we're going to change things up a bit. We're going to rebel against that status quo. Being independent / in a team. A lot of people will go freelancing, find they're working on their own a lot, and then realize that they miss being part of a team. They realize that there's a value there, something that they hold dear, that is no longer a part of their lives, and it's missing there. Overcoming setbacks, that's another possible value. that you may recognize in your own life. When you look back over the projects that you've been involved in, maybe you've been the person that's always, overcoming the obstacles that have been put in front of you. Conversely, maybe the kind of person who doesn't do that, and that's something that you kind of want to look at. But this approach here of looking at your story and bringing out your values can help to connect you to that niche community. So how might you apply these values to your work? And this is really the key, because if you're living your day-to-day life with a set of values here, but the work that you're doing is up here away from those values, then it's going to be out of sync and you're going to be frustrated and unhappy. So the goal really is to bring these values in line with the work that you do. And when you do that, that's when you reach a much more fulfilled state. So this slide here is really what this whole presentation is kind of about. So I've taken this first value of protecting and nurturing others, and I'm thinking about how you can actually put this into practice. What people can you work with? So there's a few examples on here. So for example, you might run after school music classes for disadvantaged children. That may be something that is completely out of your mind right now, but when you go through this process, you're like, oh wow, I play guitar and maybe my niece likes singing along with me. Maybe I could do something, protecting and nurturing other people. Maybe there's something there that I can do with my time and my skills to add value to other people and find that niche community of people, disadvantaged children. Have an interest in music or performance, maybe you can support them in some way. Designing marketing campaigns for anti-bullying charities. So again, that's taking your marketing design skills and it's applying it to that value of protecting and nurturing other people, supporting those charities that are engaged in anti-bullying campaigns. Sorry, I can't see that properly. Delivering digital inclusion training for out of work adults. So maybe you're good at performing, maybe you're good at creating materials, but you don't want to do that in a corporate setting. You want to do it to support and protect and nurture other people. Well, okay, there's a community there that I can get involved with, where I can use those skills and I can align them with my values. You can create a personal development platform for entrepreneurs. This doesn't all have to be super, super altruistic. You can do something that serves people in different ways. So creating a development platform for entrepreneurs, supporting people that are wanting to develop their own skills and grow their own businesses. That's in a way that is protecting and nurturing other people by giving them a platform. And lastly, create digital learning materials for schools. So again, taking that creativity aspect, creating materials, writing, designing, that sort of stuff, but applying it to the education sector in some way, okay? That is a way of fulfilling that need, that value of protecting and nurturing other people. Does that all make sense? Good. So when you figure out what you care about, everything else just flows. When I decided to work with those nonprofit organizations, I was still doing web design. I was doing largely the same stuff on a day-to-day basis, but I'd connected with a sense of purpose, and I could see the impact that my work was having with those charities, and it made everything simpler. Marketing was easier, conversations were easier. So when you figure that out, when you figure out what it is that you care about, what you value, everything else just flows. So to summarize, we're to look deeply into our own story by asking good quality questions. By answering those questions, you throw light on those values. You begin to understand what it is that you're all about, the things that genuinely matter to you. And once you've figured out what matters to you, you can then go out into the world and find other people who share those values, people who care about the same things as you. That is your niche community. The next job is simply to apply your skills or do something that will add value to that community. And that's how you, that to me is how you find your niche. Why go so deep, you might ask? Why not just go onto Google, do the keyword research, uncover the opportunities, throw your weight behind some idea? Well, to me, our experiences and our story are the things that shape who we are. And it's our core values that govern how we behave. It's how we react to things, and how we behave in the day-to-day. And it's that behavior that guides where we go. Okay. So like I said, if you just go and look for a niche market for opportunistic reasons, you may be fully outside of your own values, and therefore there'll be a mismatch in what you believe and what you actually do. So go so deep to work out those values and then build out. One of the dominant themes for me was giving a voice to the underdog. I won't go into that about myself in massive detail, but the point is that small charities are like, there's a small number of charities, big charities that hoover up all of the donations, all the funding, and yet there are many small charities out there operating on very small levels of funding, doing amazing work in their areas. To me, they are the underdogs, and they're the people that I wanted to support. So I didn't go out there to work with the big charities. I went out there specifically to work with the small ones. And that was because that value emerged, and that was how I could connect my skills to it. So niching really is an extension of who you are. So I wanted to wrap up this presentation with an opportunity to find your niche. So I'm inviting everyone here to a dedicated one-to-one program, freelancers or small creative agencies, to dig into your story and uncover your values. So it's basically going through this process, but with somebody on the outside who can ask the right questions, dig into those values. But also we want to remove the sort of negative beliefs. So the example I gave earlier about running after school music classes for disadvantaged kids, right now you might think, oh, actually, that's something that I would like to maybe do at some point, but I can't do that. I can't do that for X, Y, and Z reasons. This process will enable us to ultimately obliterate those reasons so that we can go and do those things. We can create the breathing space for the big ideas, that the big vision that we want to achieve, that we really want to achieve in life based upon those values. And you can discover your perfect client niche, your perfect client niche community, the people who share those values. Moreover, we'll also look at, as part of this program, how you can embed yourself in that community authentically. So you're not just doing lots of marketing exercises just for God knows what reasons. You're actually adding value to a community. The community responds, and before you know it, you have a profitable and fulfilling business. That's what we all want, isn't it? So I'm going to put that invite together and send it out to everybody as part of this presentation today. So check your inbox for that sometime this week.